Welcome to a Kids Life podcast. I'm Angela Lockwood, and for the last 20 years, I have been working in schools, supporting teachers to build inclusive classrooms. Through a Kids Life podcast, my goal is to help us adults better understand the complexities of life as a kid. My guests and I share stories, reflections, and simple strategies to support kids of all needs as they walk through life. So whether you're looking for inspiration, direction, guidance, tips, or just a laugh, a Kids Life podcast is the place for you. Enjoy. Welcome to a Kids Life podcast. I'm Angela Lockwood, and in this episode, I am joined by somebody who I have watched and admired her work for many years. So I'm very excited. I've told a few people, I have to admit, that I've got this lady on, and they've all gone, "Oh, how in the world have you gotten to speak to her?" So I am really excited because the work of my guest today is really far-reaching. It makes a direct impact in the lives of thousands of children each and every year, and not to mention the direct work that they do, but also in the indirect work through educating people on how to better support children. And I am joined today by Dr Susie O'Neill, the founding director and CEO of Kids Foundation. Welcome, Susie.
Good morning, Angela.
Look, I'm so happy to have you on here. I love looking at you right now. You have the Kids Foundation banner behind you with these little heads sticking out, and I can't wait to sort of dive into the work of Kids Foundation. But just for those our listeners who aren't familiar with the work of Kids Foundation, it's an organisation that's been supporting children who are at risk for over 25 years. And the focus is on childhood injury prevention and recovery from injury, which I'm sure we're going to get into. Dr. O'Neill is a Doctor of Philosophy of Education and a qualified preschool and primary school teacher and a super duper author who we will get into these two amazing new books that she has just recently launched. And so you can see that Dr. O'Neill is somebody who is very welcomed on a Kids Life podcast, because on here it's all about kids and helping kids have the best start in life. So how do you feel when I read that out, this bio of this amazing woman? You've just recently released two new books, not one, but two. How are you feeling right now? Because that was only last week, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was pretty exciting because the book writing started well over 10 years ago, and in between I ended up doing my PhD, and after finishing it I just thought, I don't want to write for any length of time. I need a break. But then when COVID happened and I had this extra time, I sort of pulled all the stories out and started to piece it together. And it started off as one book, and then an author looked at it and they said, "Do you know what? You've really got enough content for two." And so it turned out to be two books,
which we will talk about shortly, because the titles are amazing. When bad things happen, good things can grow, and let kids be kids. So I'm really excited to jump into that. But before we do, I did, of course, do a lot of research on you. You have a lot of things that you have done in your life, which was amazing just to dig deep on some of that. But one of the things that really jumped out for me, Susie, was when I went to your website at susieo'neill.com.au. The header banner has a picture of you surrounded by children who looked like they've, had an experience of burns, or they've been through some sort of physical trauma. And you have a byline on that says, "Helping you find your happy." I looked at it, I was like, wow, I need to talk to you about that. Tell me about why you chose that image and why you chose that tagline to be the front-facing page.
I suppose the word happy and happiness is the most important word to me. And I can remember when I had my children and they were really young and people were saying, "I want my child to do this." And my thing was, I just want my child to be happy, and that would make me happy. And I think I have 4 children and now 10 grandchildren, and all I want them to be is happy. So that's sort of the reason I chose that. And I have a favourite quote, and it is all about happiness.
So what, we hear a lot about happiness now, it's something that's talked about a lot. I was very fortunate one year to actually be a speaker with the Dalai Lama at the World Happiness Conference. Wow. So happiness is something that I'm really interested in too. What do you think is really the definition of happiness for you? What brings you happiness?
Really simple things. And I think COVID also helped us to reflect on things that, not such big picture things, but more little everyday things that make us happy. And the things that I started to enjoy was just sitting in a hot bath, or not having to be somewhere at a certain time. And I'm a very creative person. So when I create something, I get this really warm feeling. Or if I see that I've been able to help somebody and I watch them, then that gives me this really warm feeling, and it's my happiness.
So what do you think for parents and adults when they say, that I just want my child to be happy? What do you think as adults we really mean by that?
I think, as a parent, we all have lots of challenges. And if your child is coping okay and they're quite resilient, and to sit back and watch them and allow them to have their own space in creating that resilience and their own happiness. And I think it is important that we sometimes don't put our idea of happiness on children. So everybody owns their own happiness, and it's not something that anybody can advise them on. So I think you have to let kids just be, and they will show you their happiness without having preconceived ideas of what that should be, because everybody's happiness is different.
It's interesting we're talking about this morning. Only yesterday I was at the beach with one of my friends who has a 2-year-old daughter, and I had my little puppy walking along the beach with them, and we were just chatting, and I looked at her daughter and I said, look at how joyful she is. Isn't that really amazing that young children just seem to have an innate sense of joy, don't they? They just seem to see the simple things. What do you think? I don't want to say that children lose it at a particular time, but is there a shift? For adults listening to this, for little kids, we see this beautiful, happy joy. What are some of the things that happen throughout a child's life that might lead them to become less happy, less joyful, and more like us adults?
Interestingly enough, I think it has a lot to do with relationships. I found in my own life, if somebody isn't treating you the way that you want, then it really makes you feel uneasy and unhappy. Whereas when somebody is showing you gratitude, and I think what happens with children growing up, if they have too many expectations put onto them, and they're trying to achieve for not necessarily their own goals. And I think that's where, and also I believe that peer relationships have a lot to do with it. And that's sort of really from my own family's perspective. And I know that, I've got 4 very happy, healthy children that are now all adults with families of their own. But I can remember one of my children going through a really difficult time, and he had actually joined up with a group of young people and certainly had been involved in activities like drug taking. And he ended up in a very bad place. And I can remember the one day we found him when he wasn't so good. I actually thought he had died. And he's just said he hit rock bottom. And I think that was the thing that really turned him around. He came to us, and we as a family do Ironman events. And he came to us and he said, I want to do an Ironman. And he went and we thought, we're not going to give you any flash bike, you can just get an old bike. And he went and did this event, and he placed in it the first time, and he had no expectations, but that gave him confidence. And, that turned his whole life around. So now he's in the fitness industry. He's the most amazing motivator for young people in that area. And he's even helped that many people just that have gone down the wrong path to come back, and they're now off drugs and alcohol and got great jobs and family life. So I'm sort of really proud of him. But so I think, peer relationships play a huge part. And, and kids sort of go through a phase where, mum and dad are everything. And then all of a sudden their world is centered around their peers and they want to be accepted. And sometimes that's going outside what really makes them comfortable, and it takes them a while to find themselves again.
So Susie, the work of Kids Foundation is very much, the age range? Is there a younger age or an older age of the children that you predominantly work with?
No, look, with the Kids Foundation in our prevention program, I might go back to when the Kids Foundation started, but I was a teacher straight out of uni, actually at uni, and I had to go and do a placement. And the first little girl I met in my first placement day was a little girl with her hands covered in cigarette burns. And I ended up reporting the incident, and the Children's Protection Society asked me to come and work as a volunteer with them, which I did for about 3 years and spoke at a lot of their functions. And so that was when I sort of thought I want to be more than a teacher. And I then went on, and I remember coming out of university and they said, look, there are going to be no teaching places until September. We've got, far too many teachers and not many positions. So I looked around and there was a position advertised, and it had educational coordinator for a daycare centre to run their kindergarten. And I thought, oh, this sounds great. So anyway, I applied and got the job. And they said you must commit for a year, because in this group of children that you're going to be working with, they have varied abilities and they need reliability. And I said, okay. So I said I committed for a year, and about a month later I got a teaching position out at regional primary school, and I deferred for a year. But that was life-changing, and I stayed there for a number of reasons. Firstly, because I really was keen to have my own family and I could take them to work with me, so that was a real bonus. But I ended up, my first class, I had 12 children in the class, and 7 of the 12 were actually registered with the Gifted Society, so they were very intellectually capable. And then I had a little boy that was Down syndrome and another little boy that was intellectually challenged. So the program that I was going to give the children had to be stimulating for all of them. So I thought, okay, we'll do Monday and Thursday, we'll do in the kindergarten. On a Tuesday, I used to take them to a local library, and we sort of developed a love for books. On a Wednesday, I would take them to an aged care centre where they would adopt a grandparent, and they would go and each week, and they had amazing relationships with these elderly people. And then on Friday, I took them to a pool and taught them to swim. So by the end of that year, they could all confidently swim 25 metres, but it was more about the safety aspect of it rather than teaching them to swim. But when we were at the aged care centre on a Wednesday, there was a young boy there one day that came down, and I said, how come you're here? And he said, oh, well, I've been in a horse riding accident and there's no place for me to be rehabilitated. And he was actually sleeping in a ward with 3 elderly men. So I went home to my husband that night and I said, what can we do? And he said, well, I've got tradie mates. Maybe we could find an area within the hospital that we could renovate and make it more child friendly. So I went to the director the next day and he said, yeah, look, there's an old cafeteria down the back. If you can get it together, you can have it. So we raised some money and we got all the people in ready to start. And then the government said, look, we're going to refurbish the whole hospital. So if you put all your money and the resources that you've purchased into making it child friendly, we'll develop it. So they developed it, and that centre today exists. It has about 650 children that go through it each year, both for day and overnight therapy. And it has a therapy pool, and it was far more, fancy and advanced than we had ever dreamt of. But to see it now, and some of the children actually end up coming back to the foundation. So the foundation, they quite often will come as a child, but it's a lifelong relationship. So they stay with the Kids Foundation for their entire life, and then they have families, and the families wonder why, mum and dad look different because of a burn injury or whatever their injury may be. And then they see other families that are the same, and then they've developed some really beautiful relationships and supported each other in many different ways. But sort of being a teacher, I wanted to find out why there were so many children that were being injured. There are 5,000 children that present to an emergency department of a hospital every day in Australia. And what were we doing about educating them? And when I went and had a look at the programs that were offered, they were all offered to educators of educators. So it was the teachers and the parents. But then nobody was talking to the children. And I, after working with the children in the kindergarten and just seeing how capable they were and how much they could contribute to their own learning, I thought this is a gap here. So the minister at the time was Phil Goode, and he was the Minister for Education, and he loved the concept that I had. And I remember him saying, I would meet with him quite regularly and tell him sort of where we're at. So we developed this program, and originally it went into the primary schools, and it was going extremely well. It was sponsored by WorkSafe Victoria, and I can remember WorkSafe doing an independent research on it, and it actually rated the highest of any of their performing partners because of the success rate it had in building safety awareness. But after a new minister came in and he said, we're not going to fund any more programs that educate under 16 years of age. So we can no longer support the foundation. And they said, but if you can prove to us that these values that you instill in young people are life-lasting, then we'll reconsider. So how do I do that? So I ended up ringing a teacher at the university, and they said, well, maybe we could look at doing some research on it. And then they said, well, even better, why don't we apply for Australian Research Council grant and look at doing a PhD? And I said, okay, that's fine. And so they looked around for somebody, and they came to me one day and they said, Susie, we think you're the right person for this. And I'm going, oh, no, I couldn't possibly, work full-time and do this. And anyway, I did. I ended up taking it on, and I did have to step down and reduce the hours that I was working at the foundation. But we're only very short sort of into probably the first year, and one of the supervisors came to me and she said, look, I want you to go away and read all this information and then come back and tell me that you're working with the right age group. So I went away and I did quite a lot of reading on theorist Vygotsky and realised that the cultural historical concept behind what we teach was more appropriate. And it basically said that, and I don't like using age here, so this is very much about stage, so it's that preschool stage, but usually between the ages of 4 and 6, that children can act with understanding. So if we're going to start instilling self-awareness and so forth and safety risk management, then we needed to do it at a much younger age. So our sort of grade 5-6 program all of a sudden came down to 4-6, but there was nothing there that I could use as a tool to do the research on. So I started writing the books on Seymour safety, and they said, these books are great and your resources are terrific, but they need to be validated. So then I sent them off to the Geelong Safe Smart program, and they took it for 2 years, and they ran it through a lot of kinders in the Geelong region and came back to me with the results, and then that allowed it to be validated for the university. And that program exists now, and we were so excited because we actually reached 10,000 preschools and kindergartens this year, and 465,000 children books were printed. So
wow, I feel like if I was good at audio, I could insert a clapping overtone, clapping audio. That is absolutely remarkable, and I just listening to you, I was so just in awe of how just one idea, one interaction with a little girl has sparked this lifetime commitment for you, and it's led you on these paths. I think that's why I've always loved watching the work of Kids Foundation, because it seems like you're never satisfied that your work is done, that there's always something more to do. Does it feel like that for you, that there's always something more?
I think I need like 48 hours a day to do what I really want to do.
Imagine what can be done with more Susie O'Neills. Imagine that.
Actually, look, we have a fabulous team here, and it's only very tiny. There's only 7 of us and we're all part-time, but our reach is fantastic. And we work on a budget that's well under $1 million, but reach over 400,000 children. So we are extremely proud of the work that we do. And some of the feedback, like every day we get feedback from educators that say, and they'll send us photos or little videos. Even when our office was broken into and we had all our computers and things stolen, these little kids did a little story video telling them how much they loved us and how much they loved Seymour, just to cheer us up on that particular day. So, yeah, there's some really lovely educators and schools out there or kindergartens that value our work.
Susie, you mentioned the values that you instill through your programs. Can we talk a little bit more about that? What are the values that you're working with kids, and are they things that, for a kindergarten student, they already have, or is it something that you're helping them develop? Sort of felt like that was a two-pronged question then. What are the values and how do they get developed?
No, see, what worries me a bit about educating children. First of all, I value children or programs that allow children to have agency in their learning. So they need to be the decision makers. And quite often children are pushed into things that they're just not ready for. And with self-awareness, risk management is equally self-awareness, because the children for example, if a child's pushed too soon into something, they have a very negative experience. And what we try to do is say to children, everybody is different. We all have different capabilities. Like little Johnny here, who jumps on his bike without training wheels, can go round and round and he's okay with it. But the other little child who's even scared to get on the bike, we're here to help you. So let's see how we can help you. First of all, we're going to, ride beside you. And then you actually give them little tiny steps so that they achieve them. And then once they've achieved them, they can move on. And eventually they'll be able to achieve what the other child has achieved in a much different time frame. And it's all based on the experiences that they have in life. So the values that I have is that children need agency in their own learning. The three probably words that I use most is trust, loyalty, and kindness. So I try and instill that a trusted person is one of the greatest assets that you can have, to be kind to somebody, and then you'll always have their back, or they'll always have yours. There'll be that ongoing loyalty. And those values are in Kids Foundation. They are very much, and I really believe in individualism. So to let a child just be the way that they feel comfortable to be.
Well, on that note, it's a perfect segue into the title of one of your new books, Let Kids Be Kids. What does that title mean? And, as for adults, how can we let kids be kids? Because I don't know if I could, being an occupational therapist that's worked with kids, for 20 years, I've seen the way children interact with the world change very much. And you would expect that over 20 years of time. But letting kids be kids, I'd be really interested. Actually, I'm going to get to that question in a minute, because I want to know. I'm going off on tangents because there's so much I want to know from you. Tell me about the title of Let Kids Be Kids, and what does that look like?
Okay, so Let Kids Be Kids is really about raising happy, healthy and safe children. So that's sort of the book.
Oh, yes, we're looking at the title of the book, and I love it. You've got a little tiny child there with the helmet on and a skateboard. Yeah. I love it. So simple and beautiful.
Yeah, so it's very much about that. And I'd like to just read this quote that I absolutely love, and it really sort of stands for everything. It was, when I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment, and I told them they didn't understand life. And I think that is, it's just my favourite quote. And I remember when I put the book out, Professor Marion Fleur, who was my supervisor during the PhD, she read the book and she said, what is so special about this book is that it recognises that children are curious and amazing human beings, while reminding us they have not experienced the world for as long as we have. And I think that's sort of really important, that children need the opportunity to be able to learn through a relationship with a more advanced adult or child, so that they can progress and reach their optimal potential that they want.
I'll go back to my ramble earlier that that is there a fine line between, we hear about the helicopter parent that wants to keep a child safe, because we watch the news, we hear about all these awful things. I don't watch the news because I know that things are out there. I just don't want to be bathed in it and live my life in fear. We know that that's there, that the risk is there, that there's a lot of things that children need to cope with and deal with. But then how do you balance that with allowing them to let kids be kids and let them explore and let them take risks at an age-appropriate level?
Two words that I think are too defining that I don't really like. I think stranger danger is a word that doesn't resonate with me, because it labels a person, whereas I think most people we don't know are really lovely, kind people, but there occasionally is a person that displays bad behaviour. And we need to be aware of them, and there's things that we can do to look out. And I have a number of things in the book that I talk about there. And then the other word that I really don't like is the word bullying, because it really is a meaningless word. I just believe it's about respect and kindness and understanding. So if we can raise our children to show how life is much more enjoyable when you show to others the understanding if they are different, or being kind to somebody, just the rewards that you can personally get, then I think our generation would be a lot more resilient and understanding.
And I would imagine those conversations need to start with parents as well, not just teachers, but with parents as well, that having those conversations in the home around being respectful and having good, positive relationships. So obviously, I know that through your book, you talk about some strategies also for parents to be able to work through. Can we just really quickly talk about role models? It's something that I'm really fascinated by. Like, I look to you and I think you're a role model within supporting children and ensuring children have a good start in life. How important are role models in the early lives of children?
Role models and I would say and peer support are the two critical things for a child, especially when you work in the foundation and you see the children that, like, there's one young boy that came to the foundation and he was 10 years old. He'd been burnt as a child and his upper body was extremely disfigured. And he said, I'd only ever been to church and school. And he hated going to the supermarket because of the stares and the questions that people would ask. He came to the foundation, and on the first camp that we had, we mentored him with a gentleman, and the gentleman he was a karate instructor. So one of the activities we did was that I actually met this young boy, Matt, on this particular day because we were playing this game with karate and we're running around tagging each other. And one thing you had to do is if you got tagged, you had to get down and do push-ups. And so Matt had been tagged and he was doing push-ups, and I accidentally tripped over him and landed on him and face planted him into the sand. And when he got up, he was covered in sand. And I jokingly said to him, I hope you never get a black belt. Anyway, he did. He went on to get his black belt. And so this gentleman mentored him for a number of years in the Kids Foundation program. And he's a young kid so now he's a 23-year-old that has his own business, has built his own home, which he did some manual work himself. And he is the greatest speaker and the most adored role model now for the young people. He spoke with me in front of 2,500 people, and he is amazing. But I think, he had, wonderful parents, but just building his confidence up over those years. And he talks openly about it in the other book, about what a mentor and having support people around them. And I think what the other thing that we found with the Kids Foundation with the survivors in the recovery program is when the children come, they think they're the only ones that have experienced that sort of trauma or that sort of injury. And some of the trauma, 1/3 of the children that come into the Kids Foundation have actually been injured by a parent or a carer.
Sorry, so was that 1/3 of children?
About between 25% and 30% of the children that come into the foundation have been injured by a parent or a carer. So, for example...
Wow, that does take your breath away, doesn't it, even listening to that? Yeah.
So one camp we had 2 boys that came along, and one of the boys had been put in boiling water by his mother. And when he was that badly injured, he died several times on the way to the hospital and so forth. The other mother had put the child in the car seat and sort of in rubbish that was on the floor and set the rubbish alight. So these 2 boys had both been burnt by a parent that they trusted. So they're little babies or little young people and they ended up they were then sent to foster homes. The foster families ended up adopting them both. So for them to come together at the camp as young teenagers, they had something in common that they could share that nobody else could understand. So there's lots of children in the foundation that are in that situation. But surprisingly enough, the that I sort of really feel for are the ones that you can't visually see that they've been injured. So we've got this beautiful little girl that was actually a car ran up the back of their car, and she has now acquired a brain injury, and she's very intelligent and capable of doing lots of things, but she can't control emotions. And the saddest thing is when you go somewhere and somebody sees a child that is visually injured, or then they have empathy, whereas when they see a child that is not acting the way that what they call normal, which there is no normal, then they're already judging. So that's what I was also meaning in understanding, showing kindness, because everybody has a story.
Susie, listening to those and examples, you've helped so many thousands of children through the work of Kids Foundation. And I'm sure a lot of those stories are very common that you just sort of shared. How do you look after yourself? How do you take care of your own mental well-being? And I know you're an Iron woman, and that's amazing. 17, I don't know how you do it. I have no aspirations of even doing one. So to do 17, maybe even more, I'm really in awe. But your mental well-being, how do you stay mentally strong?
Well, I might just jump back to the Ironman story, because I remember going along to I think physical exercise is absolutely something that I will do every single day of my life, because I believe that is really important in mental and physical well-being. But I remember going along to the Ironman. I don't have one bit of physical capability in my body, I think, as far as ever being a champion at anything. But I can remember going to watch the Ironman, and I stayed round to the end, and it was a 15.5-hour cut-off then. And the last 5 people that came across, all the pros had come out, and they'd lit the finish chute, and they had thousands of people cheering them on. And they came across just in time for cut-off. And I remember thinking, wow, if you ever felt like you were an Olympian or a champion, this would be it. So I decided, okay, I went home, and I didn't own a bike. I'd only ever had one trike thing as a child, and I couldn't swim more than 25 metres. So my father-in-law was a swimming coach. I said, do you think you'd teach me to swim? He goes, yeah, we can teach anybody to swim. And then I went and bought a bike, and then 18 months later, I did my first Ironman. And I remember the emotions of finishing that day. I came 5th last out of about 1,000 people, but I didn't care. It was one of the best days of my life. And I remember, and my dream was one day to make it to Hawaii, but to make it to the Hawaiian Ironman, you actually have to qualify. But I'd done that many that I got an invitation to compete as a legacy athlete. And so my first Ironman was amazing, and so was my last, and that was at the Hawaiian Ironman in 2017. So it was only 4 years ago, but Ironman actually changed my life in many ways, and it also saved it, because I use a heart rate monitor every day to monitor, my heart rate. And I remember going for a ride one day, and my heart rate wasn't quite the normal heart rate that I usually display. And I was riding with my GP, and I said to him, oh, it's really funny, my heart rate today it's up a little bit. And he goes, oh, your family history with hearts isn't so good, so let's get it checked out. So I did, and they said, oh, no, everything's fine, but we might just do an ultrasound. And in the ultrasound, they found a tiny spot, and the cardiologist said, look, it looks like you've got a little tumour there, but, you've probably been born with it, so let's just forget about it and we'll come back in 6 months. He said it's 0.4 and it doesn't get dangerous until it's 1 centimetre. So I went back 6 months later, and it was 1.7 centimetres, and they said, right, open heart surgery, and they had to remove it actually fell off in the surgery. So if I hadn't have had it operated then, I probably had only a couple of weeks to live. But I remember, because I was so fit, that 3 months later I did a 200-kilometre walk through England, which I'll have to tell you a story about with Let Kids Be Kids. And then, so 6 months from the surgery, I competed in the half Ironman World Championships in Las Vegas. So the fitness level allowed me to do it. So fitness is extremely important for my own well-being. But I just talked about walking across the English countryside, and we came to this property, and I thought it said, beware free-range chickens. And I thought, oh, that's okay. So we sort of get up there, and as I got closer, it said, beware free-range children. And so we get up there, and there are children paddling in the creek, and there's some on the fence and some on the back of a cow. And I'm thinking, my goodness. So we go in, and we meet this shepherdess who was actually from Australia, and she'd moved to England, and she had 7 children, and they were climbing, they were amongst the sheep, the animals, wherever it was. And I thought, oh, this is fantastic, because they obviously learnt to be supervised by their brothers and sisters, but also they were extremely capable. Anyway, we went in, and we noticed she was pregnant, and she said, oh, yeah, I'm actually due tomorrow. So that was number 8. And she said, and we said, oh, but you're so far from a hospital. She said, yeah, I usually do. We usually have them in the car on the way to the hospital. So I thought, but what I really loved about that was their attitude to, they were on a farm. The children were obviously, they had learnt their skills by the parents allowing them to be free range, and they had a beautiful life, and they were extremely happy children.
Oh, Susie, you've got so many stories. I feel like I can't wait to read more of your books, because I think having the history, I could only imagine what goes on inside your mind around what you've seen with kids, the stories you've had with kids, your own life experiences. You've got 4 children of your own, but you've also backed it all up with so much research as well. And I think for people that are listening to this, we can't cover everything in Susie's life on this podcast, I think, or in the work of the Kids Foundation, because it's so far-reaching and so deep as well. But Susie, before we finish up, for people that are listening to this, and are thinking, okay, I really want to navigate this world and support my children the best that I can, for teachers and for parents, how can I do that? How can I help support young people to have the best life that's available to them by also keeping them happy?
Yeah, well, I suppose this book sort of says it all, but I've sort of broken it down to different sections, and the sections are titled Happy, Healthy and Safe, and there's lots of different ways within the happiness, and it talks about mindfulness, but it also educates parents on why your child acts how they do. And by that I mean, recently, we were talking before about wellbeing. I went to a retreat, and I had never been sort of engaged with a psychotherapist before, and I never really understood where our personalities or how they're actually formed. But we sort of know that, oh, that child's got just like their mother, or that child. But actually, like 90+% of our personalities come from our parents. So from you as a parent and the other biological parents.
Oh, dear.
Yes. So if we're actually, having an opinion on the way our children are acting, sometimes we need to look at ourselves. And then the rest is really about the way that you educate and you raise them. So, they've already got a lot of their personality instilled way before you can make sure that they're happy, healthy children. But, yeah, so there's lots of different ideas in the book. But we talk about, just simple things like mindfulness, breathing. There's proper ways to breathe, eating healthy foods that taste wonderful, developing great relationships. There's exercising. So there's lots of different ideas in there. Drinking plenty of water. Like, water is one of the greatest things that we can do for our health, and we just don't drink enough water. So just little simple things like that, and fun ways that if your children challenge you a little bit with the food that they're eating, just some fun things that you can do with the food to make it more encouraging for the children to enjoy.
And listening to you then go through some of those items, it sometimes goes, we sort of know this stuff, but it's like we know this stuff, but we don't do it. And we need constant reminders, and we need it simplified, because I think sometimes as adults, we just overcomplicate things, don't we? We make things so overcomplicated that it really is those basics that you just talked about that are so powerful, and for kids can make such a big difference. And for listeners right now, whether you're having a child in your life as a teacher or as a parent or even as a carer, I absolutely encourage you to please go and grab yourself a copy of both of these books. Susie has really, and Susie, I'm speaking to you, but I'm going to pretend you're not there for a moment, that the work of Kids Foundation is so impactful for young people. We focus a lot on older kids, which we know and is equally as important, but often these young children really do get overlooked, and it's those early stages, those early developmental milestones for them, and the behaviours that they develop that really do shape a lot of their growing up and a lot of their experience of life. So the work of Susie and her team at the Kids Foundation is something that people really need to pay attention to. And now we have easy access to Susie through her 2 books. So I thank you so much. Now, Susie, where can people buy them from? I know that it's everywhere and you've just launched. So where can people go to get it if they want a copy before Christmas?
Well, we've really just had a soft launch, but hoping that they will be in bookstores soon. We haven't gone out to the bookstores at this point, but you can get it on Amazon. Both books are on Amazon. There's When Bad Things Happen, Good Things Can Grow, both in hard and soft copy. And then there's the other book is also available, Let Kids Be Kids, Raising Happy, Healthy and Safe Children, both on Amazon through the Kids Foundation website or through my own website. There's a link there that they can purchase the book. If any of the listeners do purchase it and they'd like me to sign something and send it, I'm more than happy to, and I'd love their feedback, because I think the title of When Bad Things Happen, Good Things Can Grow, and there's so many stories in that book where it is the absolute worst tragedy that could have happened to this person, but it's turned out to be the best thing in their life, because it's set the path that they've gone on, and they wouldn't be the people today if it hadn't have happened the way it did. So I think there's 1,000,001 stories that can follow on from that book. And if there are people out there that have their own story and would like to share it, I think we've got the second version of that one coming along already.
It'll be the first two of many. And of course, at the bottom of the show notes of this episode, we will have everything to Susie linked at her website, as well as kidsfoundation.org.au, and all the work of where you can purchase both the books from. But Susie, I want to thank you so much, as I know you're an extremely busy lady doing very, very important work. And I just want to thank you, because my whole purpose in life is helping kids have the best start in life, and to look to people like you who each and every day are doing that, and not just on a small scale, but a grand scale. You know, you're the unsung heroes for our kids that not a lot of people know about, and you just go along your work, making a difference each and every day. So I just want to thank you so much from me, from people who work with children, and please keep going. And, you know, there are people out there who are listening right now who, if you have been affected by any of the things that we've talked about, there are links to where you can get support as well. But if there are also people who are listening and going, I want to be involved in Kids Foundation, I want to support them, I want this work in schools, where can I get more of Susie and more of the Kids Foundation? I'll have all those contacts at the bottom as well. So Susie, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed having a chat.
Thank you. Have a beautiful Christmas break, Susie, and all the best with the rest of the launches. And also actually keep an eye out, because Susie may be coming to a place near you to have a book launch. So please go along and support Susie getting this book out there far and wide. I'm Angela Lockwood. Thanks so much for joining me on a Kids Life podcast. And I have had the very, very privilege of speaking to Dr. Susie O'Neill, the founding director and CEO of Kids Foundation. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, enjoy. Thank you for listening to a Kids Life podcast. To stay up to date on all the new episodes, please subscribe on all the places where podcasts are found. If you want to learn more about my teacher and parent programs, please go to angelalockwood.com.au. Until next time, slow down, have fun, and take care of our kids.